to this recent Supreme Court of Ontario case. Would Terri-Jean Bedford, Amy Lebovitch, and Valerie Scott please come out here? So I'm not certain how you're going to do this. Are you going to speak in sequence? Yeah? Well, have a seat. And
I'll go first?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Moses. I see some former clients in the audience. Does it still hurt? I bet it does. Okay. So before anything else, I would like to thank Valerie and Amy for leading this fight and for being such wonderful spokespersons in this and other initiatives to protect women and our freedoms. They will have many important points for you to consider today. I would also like to thank my lawyer, Professor Alan Young, who headed our legal team, and he's also my superhero. I would also like to thank Her Honor, Justice Susan Himmel, and the Court of Appeal for striking down those monstrous laws. Now, if I was an adversary of Prime Minister Harper, I would thank him too for being so feckless in this matter. And for those of you who may not know, feckless is a person who is lacking in efficiency or vitality, who is unthinking and irresponsible. Thank you. I really have no business commenting on his handling of the economy, his foreign policies, or what he is doing to protect the environment and so forth. But on his handling of the issues we are discussing today, I can tell you he has been a very bad boy indeed. Yes. His government was caught totally off guard when Justice Himmel's ruling came out in September 2010, and I'm told they made no preparations for the release. They announced they would appeal about 3 hours after the release, and they did so without time to read it properly and consult properly. Incompetence. And he fired no one for this. Naughty Mr. Harper says unelected judges should not make laws. 6 judges have told him to involve himself and that the laws are problematic, to say the least. Yet the elected bad boy runs to hide behind the robes of yet more unelected judges. What does that say about him? Does he know that these proceedings are the culmination of 4 years of a virtual public inquiry? Does he know that the findings were that the present laws create more violence and human trafficking than they prevent? Does he know that the judges found there will not be an increase in prostitution, whatever that is, if the laws are removed? Mr. Harper says he's against prostitution and he vows never to make it legal. Yet he wants to keep the current laws intact. Under the current laws, prostitution is legal. Can you believe this guy? Now, we all know that premarital sex is legal. Women can have sex with whomever they want, when they want. Does Mr. Harper have a problem with that? It appears he does. It seems to me he has no problem with it so long as she does it for free. It seems to me he wants to control women's bodies. If she negotiates dinner for sex, is she a criminal? Does she have to lie back and think of Harper when she has sex? What does Mr. Harper mean when he says prostitution? Does he mean sex for money? How about when I tie a man up and tickle him? Is it sex? Is it legal? Is it legal if I do it for free? When I put men in corsets and dresses, am I a prostitute? I'm sure Mr. Harper can share some of his acknowledged expertise in these matters. He should, because the laws he seeks to preserve are impermissibly vague in giving us answers. That means unelected officials, for arbitrary reasons, will decide when people's private consenting behavior is not legal. And if anyone knows anything about officials like that, it's me. Now, women are having sex all over the place, every day, wherever they want, whenever they want, including the privacy of their own home. But the minute one red cent changes hands, she's a criminal. Now, why does Mr. Harper feel the need to have his lackeys tell me what I can and cannot do in the privacy of my home or my bedroom with another consenting adult. We must move away from a moral basis for legislating on this issue and towards a safety basis. We women must not lose control of our bodies or our lives. Our country, other countries hopefully are moving forward in emancipating women. Don't allow Mr. Harper to move us backwards. So I turned to Laureen Harper, Mr. Harper's wife, and I asked her to read the decision and tell her elected husband what the findings were and send Mr. Prime Minister to me for a lesson in behavior modification he'll never forget. I'll make a man of him. Thank you very much.
I'm going to stay. Can you hear me?
Maybe you should sit here.
Okay.
Light.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to talk about the 3 laws which we are challenging in court and how they affect directly sex workers and how that looks like, very briefly. So the first law that I'm going to talk about is the communicating law. And that law tends to target primarily those who work outdoors. And how that affects them is their safety and their well-being while working. So for example, they aren't working together with other people, so they are isolated and alone. They're working in areas that are unlit and unpopulated, for fear of the police, for fear of community groups that target them. And what that looks like for my colleagues that work outdoors is they are getting into cars with potential clients without assessing the risk that they may have, without discussing services or the fee that is offered. And so that puts them in great danger. The second law that I'm going to talk about is the body house law. And so what that says is, and what the body house law is defined as in the criminal code, is anywhere that is used for the purpose of prostitution. And so that could be a rented apartment, it could be somewhere that you own, it can be a hotel room, it can be a location where there are multiple people working, sharing costs. And so what that does, not being able to work out of our own home, and how that looks, is if we are a victim of a crime, the chances of reporting that to the police are very slim, if not, it doesn't happen. And the reason why is because fear of repercussions. So fear of being targeted as a sex worker, being targeted in our apartment building or our place. And if you're charged with body house, it is an enterprise crime. And so they do seize your assets. They can...
How far does that go?
Sorry?
How far does that go?
Yes. Your bank account, your possessions. If you are, like myself, an out sex worker, being able to rent a place to live, maybe not even to work, but to live, you are targeted as someone who has sex for money and is undesirable to live. And so you're not rented places. And the third law is living on the avails. And it's also called the pimping law or procuring. And what that does is, and I'll read you what the law actually says. Anyone who lives wholly or in part on the avails of prostitution, or lives with or is habitually in the company of a prostitute. So that looks like a friend, a roommate, a spouse. And if sex workers have support staff, drivers, receptionists, and other security measures, that is targeted under that law. And it has a minimum sentence of up to 10 years in prison. And so what that law does is it specifically targets our relationships. And really briefly, one more thing. We already have laws in place in Canada that say we can't forcibly confine somebody, we can't extort somebody. And so having this additional law targets our relationships, how we keep ourselves safe, and it is very redundant and harmful to our livelihood. And so there's lots more to talk about, but I'm going to pass this off to my colleague Valerie now. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I would like to mention that the good news is that in virtually every country of the world now, sex workers are mobilizing to ensure our civil and our occupational rights. It's a global movement. Regrettably, religious fundamentalists and radical feminists, their bedfellows, are right there and also mobilizing against sex work and any notion of sex worker rights. We call these people prohibitionists because they seek to end all prostitution. They will tell you that they are on a crusade against human trafficking, but about 20 years ago, they changed their mandate to include all consensual adult sex work. They see all prostitution as bad, and no prostitution can be prostitution of free will. If we disagree with them, they tell us that we are in denial and suffering from a false consciousness. Prohibitionists are working right now to try and have being a sex worker classified as a mental disorder, just like it used to be for gay and lesbian people in North America. They lost that fight, and they lost abortion rights, and we're pretty much all they have left. They're hanging on for dear life. But unfortunately, the world over, rescue raids are happening all the time. In Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, India, to name just a few countries, women are forcibly rescued and taken to re-education jails where they are beaten and raped and then told they don't have any self-respect. Human Rights Watch is now beginning, finally, to document some of these cases. And in two recent instances, the first one, 46 sex workers and then 21 sex workers in India rioted and broke out and got away. And the guards and the staff complained that they can't track them down because the women gave them false names and addresses. Then the guards said they are programmed to lie. Well, I think that being forcibly rescued is the same as being kidnapped, and managing to get away sure isn't a lie. Pity silences and dehumanizes, which brings me right to the Swedish model. The Swedish model seeks to re-educate the sex worker and criminally charge the client. And some people think this is a good compromise. What's behind this mode of thinking is that sex work is bad and somebody has to be at blame. The results of this Swedish model are very much like Canada under the current laws that we're still fighting in court. Women mostly work indoors, and men mostly work indoors, and the few who do work outdoors are at considerable risk because they have to work in out-of-the-way places, unlit, as Amy, my colleague, was explaining. And no one sees who you're with in Sweden. No one sees where you're going, how long you've been gone. Sexual predators know this and take advantage of it. So there aren't very many sex workers working on the streets in Sweden. And then religious fundamentalists and radical feminists take their video cameras and drive down the street, and they proclaim their new regime a success. But it, again, pity. It's just hatred with a makeover. And I want to talk about something that we hardly ever talk about with each other. And I know I'm going to, we whisper it with each other. I'm going out on a limb here. Sex work can be a really good job. And we like our jobs. Our clients are not some weird perverts from outer space. They're your fathers, your husbands, your colleagues, your neighbors. We can set our own hours. We get to call the shots as to what we do and do not do. So we would like this to be decriminalized. We don't want to set up shop, a big brothel in next door to your house. We want to be in a commercially zoned area, but not a red light district, please, no ghettos. Segregation has never worked anywhere that it has been tried. And brothel licensing fees have to be set at the same rate as any other comparable business, as they are in the country of New Zealand, which decriminalized in 2003. And things are working out really well there. The girls have pension plans. They can opt into workers' compensation. They have all kinds of stuff. It's great. And there's no reason that Canada cannot go that route. Cities do need to consider and be aware not to make the licensing fees extortionist so that only organized criminals can afford them. We need to be able to buy them. And we need to be able to control our own businesses. We've been doing a pretty good job for the last 2,000 years under very difficult circumstances. And I think it's time for Canada to adopt a mature attitude about this. Now, last March, the Ontario Court of Appeal, for the first time in Canadian law, ruled that sex work is real work and that sex workers be afforded protected rights as persons. And that's a big deal for us. I still get goosebumps. Like, I can now legally say, I am a person. Terri-Jean is a person. And Amy Lebovitch, whom without this case wouldn't even have been launched, is a mighty fine real person. So, thank you very much.